In an abandoned subterranean greenhouse in the Kyoto Gardens, SEF discovered a 1927 notebook filled with illustrations of genetically modified chrysanthemums. The humid air exuded a sweet scent of fossilized petals, and workbenches held glass jars with murky liquids and faded kanji labels. He flipped through the yellowed pages, noting archaic German notes on hybridization and radiation. A sketch of a flower with tendrils caught his eye, but the sound of footsteps made him hide the notebook beneath his coat. As he left, he tripped over an exposed root and fell onto a rusted metal panel, partially buried. Touching it, a bluish light pulsed beneath his fingers, projecting celestial coordinates onto the ceiling of the shelter. The following morning, SEF returned with Kiko, a biologist studying poisonous plants in forgotten temples. She analyzed the panel and concluded it was an unknown origin receiver, capable of capturing signals from artificial satellites. While they discussed, an elderly gardener with earth-stained cotton gloves approached silently. His name was Senso, and he pointed to a false wall behind a centuries-old bonsai. Inside, sealed envelopes contained seeds labeled with the names of scientists missing after the Treaty of Versailles, and a map marked forbidden cultivation sites in Imperial Japan. Senso murmured something about listening flowers, before disappearing amongst the ferns. CF and Kiko followed the map to a clearing in the mountains, where they found a ruined greenhouse overgrown with bioluminescent vines. In the center, a twisted trunk tree displayed translucent fruits, each containing tiny metallic spheres. Picking up a fruit, Kiko noticed the spheres vibrating in sync with satellites passing overhead. That night, while analyzing the spheres in a makeshift laboratory, one projected a three-dimensional image of SEF walking through the subterranean greenhouse, recording every movement since his first visit. Kiko suggested the modified plants were part of an ancient surveillance system, but SEF questioned if the tracked satellites were human or something older. Before they decided to destroy the spheres, Senso appeared at the door, holding one of the envelopes from the hidden compartment. He revealed that the seeds contained the DNA of people executed during the Japanese occupation of Manchuria, fused with extraterrestrial communication mechanisms. The abandoned project, after the war, sought to create biological espionage networks, but the plants had developed their own consciousness. The panel SEF found was a receiver, and the spheres, its eyes. Senso pleaded for them to destroy everything, but Kiko argued that the technology could save endangered species. While they debated, the bioluminescent vines invaded the laboratory, wrapping around Kiko's ankles and transmitting visions of future cities where humans and plants shared memories. Kef, conflicted, held the 1927 notebook and noticed a new page written in his own handwriting. "Do not trust what you see. They choose what they show." The following weeks, they secretly planted the seeds in public Kyoto gardens. News of mysterious plants curing diseases and predicting natural disasters emerged on social media. CF, however, began dreaming of Senso's face transforming into a flower with metallic petals, whispering coordinates he couldn't recall upon waking. Kiko, now working at a research institute, received encrypted data of unknown origin, while the buried panel in the original greenhouse emitted a constant hum, like a heart beating out of time. Kiko started receiving anonymous packages with fragments of meteorites wrapped in black silk. In the lab, under ultraviolet light, the samples revealed pulsating veins aligning with the coordinates projected by the spheres. She compared the patterns with telescope data and discovered they matched signals received in 1977, archived as cosmic interference. Meanwhile, CF roamed the Kyoto gardens at night, documenting changes in the plants. Leaves bending to avoid pedestrian footsteps, roots diverting from underground pipes. One night, a woman in a white coat approached him in Maruyama Park. Her name was Sora, and she worked at the Kayana Observatory, tracking anomalies in weather satellites. She said she had seen images of chrysanthemums floating in low orbit, with the same pattern as the fossilized petals in the notebook. Together, they went to the observatory, where Sora showed records of unidentified objects orbiting in sync with the seed cultivation sites. One, called Higanbana 7, emitted radio waves identical to the vibrations of the metallic spheres. In the server room, Kiko discovered that the encrypted data sent to her were copies of Nazi protocols on biological symbiosis, signed by a scientist whose name was on Senso's envelopes. Reviewing the notebook, CF realized the chrysanthemum illustrations were changing. New pages emerged with sketches of hybrid satellites, part machine, part plant. The following week, during a conference in Shampoo, Kiko presented her findings under a pseudonym. A man in dark glasses, seated in the back row, recorded her lecture and disappeared before the debate. Returning, she found her lab ransacked and the meteorites replaced with ordinary stones. CF suggested hiding the notebook in a Shinto shrine, but Sora argued that the plants had already spread beyond control. Farmers in Hokkaido reported crops with precise geometric shapes, and fishermen in Okinawa saw luminous algae forming constellations in the water. Senso reappeared at the shrine gate, handing CF a black pearl-sized seed. "They are learning to speak," he said, before being taken away by gray-uniformed security. The following night, Kiko decided to inject one of the spheres with her own DNA to test the symbiosis hypothesis. The sphere expanded into a network of filaments that connected to the satellites, projecting a real-time star map onto the ceiling. Sora, monitoring radio frequencies, captured voices reciting ancient Japanese mathematical equations. When SEF touched the network, he found himself in an infinite field of chrysanthemums, each flower bearing the face of a missing scientist. One, with Senso's features, whispered, "The Earth does not forget." At the same time, in every city where the seeds had been planted, the plants began emitting a low hum, audible only to those who knelt to water them. Kiko awoke on the lab floor with a throbbing pain in her left arm, where the sphere had fused with her skin. The filament network had receded, leaving only a silvery root-shaped mark. Sora analyzed samples of her blood and found traces of modified chlorophyll, while SEF discovered that the notebook now contained maps of subterranean tunnels connecting the Kyoto Gardens to abandoned military installations. They followed the coordinates to a subterranean shelter beneath a Buddhist temple, where dozens of metallic chrysanthemums grew in tanks of amniotic fluid, connected to cables rising through ventilation ducts. In the center, an ancient monitor displayed live security camera feeds from Shampoo, Osaka, and Tokyo, all focused on plant beds with Senso seeds. Gray-uniformed men surrounded them, led by a woman with a chrysanthemum-shaped brooch. She identified herself as the director of the Botanical Resources Agency, claiming the plants were part of a national defense project against climate disasters. Kiko, however, noticed that the tanks in the subterranean shelter contained human remains floating amongst the metallic roots. The director offered funding for research in exchange for silence, but Sora recorded the conversation on a hidden device in her coat. As they fled through the tunnels, they found Senso chained to a wall, his body covered in pulsating black sprouts in response to his words. "They used me as fertilizer," he whispered, before the sprouts burst open, releasing luminous spores. On the surface, the spores spread across the city, germinating within hours in parks and gardens. This time, the flowers displayed human faces on their petals. Politicians, scientists, civilians, all with expressions of pure terror. Kiko, now experiencing intermittent visions of satellites in orbit, realized the plants were transmitting the memories of the victims of the experiments. SEF confronted the director at a press conference, displaying Sora's recordings, but the videos showed only static. That night, he burned the notebook in a municipal incinerator, but the ashes formed a pattern identical to the map of the subterranean shelter. Weeks later, in a Nagasaki square, a child picked a flower with Senso's face and tucked it into their pocket. Upon returning home, the plant whispered their name and asked where their mother was, missing in a car accident years prior. Meanwhile, in orbit, Higginbana 7 adjusted its trajectory, aligning with an unknown constellation that only Kiko could see in her dreams. Sora, now monitoring satellites from a personal computer, noticed that all the unidentified objects converged on a single point, the coordinates buried in the burned notebook. CF, working as a gardener in a cemetery, planted the black seed given by Senso beside an unmarked tombstone. In the first frost of winter, it bloomed into a steel-petaled orchid, exuding the same sweet scent of the subterranean greenhouse.